First one is the universal immunization program. Then you need to know what is Mission Indradhanush. Then you need to know the 12 diseases for which this vaccine exists. For prelims exam, you need to know how many of them are viral diseases, bacterial diseases. Then you need to know for mains level these statistics. How did vaccination actually make an impact? A comparison between NFHS round 4 and round 5. If you want to substantiate your answer that vaccination has improved healthcare delivery, these statistics are important. Then you are also expected to know this Gram Swaraj Abhiyan, a program which is meant to increase outreach and how it is utilized by this. So there is a twofold advantage of reading this article. One, you will know the governance mechanisms, and two, you can use the information that you pick up from this article for essay, prelims, mains, science and tech, and you will see the importance of reading any article through a multidisciplinary lens. Okay? I always say that the purpose of science and technology is to solve some practical problems. In this article, there are many initiatives taken by the government for entire supply chain of vaccine from the time it is produced till it is administered to the patient and for the follow-up. We have started using various technology platforms for tracking. That is something that you should know. Okay? And this article lists some important achievements and finally ends on the concept of One Health. So many things to learn from this article. Okay? Let's break down all of them and understand how to utilize that for both prelims and mains. Clear? So the thesis that we are establishing is all the preventable diseases should be prevented, and government should go even till the last mile to ensure that no kid is left unvaccinated, because it's preventable deaths, and that becomes a moral responsibility of the state to vaccinate every child. Okay? That's why vaccination should be considered a moral tool also to fulfill a state's objective, responsibility. How did India fare? See, take a look at this. India's universal immunization program is the world's largest. It's a fact, something that you should be remembering. Okay? It contributed to a decline in under 5 mortality from 45 to 31 between 2014 and 21. What is the source? Sample Registration Survey 2021. These statistics are important to substantiate. How can you argue that our healthcare got better? These are the statistics. What is the source? SRS. Please remember that. Next, what are the 12 vaccines? They are given here. For each of these vaccines at a prelims level, you should know what is the causative agent of each of these diseases and how they can be prevented, what is the mechanism. This will be taught in the basic science and tech classes, but it's a good opportunity for you to revise these. Then, with respect to immunization coverage, how did India fare? The source is something that you have to remember. Okay? Whenever we are talking about vaccination, the next time, it's fine if you don't remember this data exactly, but at least if you have to search, you need to know where I can find the relevant data, right? National Family Health Survey. Then, from many years, this universal immunization program is happening. But there are some pockets in our country where kids are still left unattended. To cover them, government came up with this Mission Indradhanush with a focus on what Niti Aayog recognized as aspirational districts. What is aspirational district concept? Most backward districts in this country, they are recognized, and Niti Aayog created a framework within which those districts are the district collectors from the with the help of state governments, they are expected to handle these issues. So you will see how this mission Indradhanush has delivered in these aspirational districts. Even after that, there are some pockets like tribal hamlets, etc., where the results were not delivered. So we had a intensified mission Indradhanush program for low coverage areas. By 2023, 12 of the mission Indradhanush and intensified mission Indradhanush were completed. So and so numbers were achieved. Okay. And to increase this access, there is another program called Gram Swaraj Abhiyan. So this outreach program is clubbed with Mission Indradhanush, and it helped us in accessing. Instead of duplication of efforts from the government side, where two different ministries are working parallelly, why not converge them? This convergence has delivered result. So that is also a policy design that I want you to observe. Convergence of schemes. Clear? However, challenges remain in reaching even those people. So what are the challenges? One is vaccine hesitancy. What do you mean by vaccine hesitancy? People do not believe in vaccines. And this became worse after COVID, because there is a increasing mistrust on how effective these vaccines are. It's fine if they are not effective, but will they harm us? Those questions remained, and especially in this poor tribal hamlets and villages where education levels are low, this problem increased multifold. So the government is trying its best, trying to rope in civil society and convergence of various ministry works to achieve the desired objective. As a part of this, there is a strategy called zero dose strategy. Please note this down. Zero dose strategy. Zero dose strategy means tracking every kid who has never gotten even one dose of a vaccine. No vaccine. Even the most basic vaccines the kid did not get. It is important to track such kind of kids because we have, under the sustainable development goals, certain targets. The other day we were talking about SDG 3. One of the metric is child mortality. If we are missing these kids, it's an imperative of the government to save these kids, right? It's a moral imperative like we began with. And if we are missing those kids, we are basically failing. So this zero dose strategy emphasizes specifically on them. Next, we have had digital tracking technology. We will see what those are. And infrastructure improvements like building cold chain infrastructure, because vaccines need cold temperatures to survive. Otherwise, they will get degenerated or they will get spoiled. Their mechanism will no longer be relevant. Vaccine coverage. India has maintained its polio-free status since 2011 through continued stringent surveillance. See, if a country gets polio-free status, does it mean that we will never have another case of polio? It only depends on how effectively the government is monitoring a certain disease, following up with the vaccination procedures, and we are not giving up on the gains that the previous government's previous achievements are ignored. Once you have achieved something like a polio-free status, it is not something that is gifted to you. There is a tremendous amount of work from different government stakeholders to make that happen. It is the responsibility of the new governments or the upcoming governments also to not disturb that. We should continue doing that and add on that. Right. So The fact that we are still maintaining that surveillance mechanism and we are still having that polio free status, there are some countries which are seeing outbreaks of polio. Right. Even US had a polio outbreak case in the last couple of years. But India mostly avoided it. So that is also an achievement that we can claim. Okay. In this situation, you need to know the National Polio Program, which has strengthened this universal immunization program. So you have something called National Health Mission. Okay. And this is divided into rural and urban components. And this is guided by National Health Policy of 2017. One of the objective of National Health Policy is universal health care. So we can say that in a bid to give this universal health coverage, vaccination can be one of the strategy. Giving insurances is one more. But just giving insurance or just saying that one scheme or the other scheme will suffice is not going to help. It requires a holistic strategy where all the government functionaries and all the strategies should work together. Clear? So there are some other achievements mentioned here. In the long run, they are not important. But what I want you to take away is how technology has facilitated governance. I want you to use these examples of even here. UWIN, EWIN, etc. Network for Vaccine Stock, EWIN, that is Electronic Vaccine Intelligence Network for Vaccine Stock, the National Cold Chain Management Information System for Real-Time Cold Chain Tracking, and SafeVac. If there is any incident of vaccine related safety issue, there is one portal for that. Now, ideally the government should bring all these platforms together on a single portal or a single platform, integrate them, maybe connect it to the National Digital Health Mission. I'm pretty sure that in the background this activity must be going on. We will come to know about it pretty soon because it only makes a logical sense to move in that direction. See, these examples are the points that you need to take away. How technology can help you in healthcare provision. You need to come up with these examples because all these are government initiatives. Usually in our materials or in our compilations, these kind of points would not stick in your mind. Say for example, if you are looking at the entire healthcare sector, you have on the spectrum, you have prevention and this is cure. So this can be said primary and this can be said as secondary or tertiary, whatever. In this spectrum, technology can help here, here and here. At every stage of healthcare, technology can help. In the preventive part, vaccination is one strategy and under that you can add these points. Okay? That is the importance of this article. Now, recognizing the Palestine state. See, I always tell you that state is nothing but a definition which encapsulates sovereignty, population, territory and a government. So, if a political body is supposed to be recognized as a state, you need to have all of this and UN members should recognize this. Just because a UN member recognizes this doesn't mean it will come into existence as a UN body or UN member or as a independent sovereign nation. There are two different things. Let's say in this present case, France recognized Palestine as a state. What does it mean? In 1933, in the aftermath of the First World War, what constitutes a nation state became a debate. That debate was settled in Montevideo Convention, where you will see territory, population, government and sovereignty. Sovereignty means its ability to conduct relations are recognized. That is the genesis of this modern day conception of a political state. Okay. Now, does Palestine have the necessary ingredients to call itself a state? That is what this article decides. See here, 4 principal requirements as implied in the 1933 Montevideo Convention. A defined territory, a permanent population, a government, and a capacity to enter into relations. Okay. When it comes to territory, Israel practically occupies 100% of Palestinian territories. Then how are they getting recognized? That's something you need to know. But this claim that this is Palestine's land, that is what the side of Palestine claims in this body. And when we say a country recognized the state of Palestine, it also recognizes the territorial claims of that state, the so-called state. Similarly, the population, that is also a bit unclear. That is also addressed here. Conservative estimates suggest that 10% of Gaza's population has been killed or injured. But having said that, there is a recognition on behalf of Palestine for this by the states. Then you have a government. The Palestinian Authority has acted as the de jure authority in limited enclaves, but de facto control has been with Israel. So none of the parameters that govern the Montevideo Convention, there is no favor for Palestine state. However, given their claim, given their plight that they want to project in the international fora, these countries are coming to a conclusion that maybe a non-armed intervention or a intervention that can settle through a dialogue, a two-state solution, cannot be achieved through a dialogue. That is what they must be probably feeling, and that's why they're recognizing this. Okay, that is a takeaway, the Montevideo Convention. This can be asked as a prelims question. The world has a China model. See, this article is an ideologically constructed article, and this is important in international relations. Okay. This is also relevant in the case of GS1, political ideologies. There is a a term in the syllabus, political ideologies. We are not getting questions on world history of late, but there is this mention of the word political ideologies. This is there is a possibility of an interdisciplinary question in GS1 linking it to IR, GS2 and GS3. Maybe they can ask this question in international ethics, or they can ask in GS1 in world history part. From both these perspectives, this article can be very important. What does this article say? This article is written by Sanjay Baru, and basically the contention is between two models of so-called development. You have a political thinker, one second, yes, Francis Fukuyama. This person has come up with the so-called term of Washington Consensus. What is this theory about? See, Washington Consensus in the aftermath of the Second World War essentially refers to a free market where market takes care of everything. Okay, it is in this backdrop only you will see the growth of Western model, institutions led by the Western model. Even the World Bank, IMF, etc., the so-called Bretton Woods institutions, even though they claim they are here for a post-World War reconstruction, they have this philosophy of Western inclination. As opposed to that, in a bipolar world led by Cold War between US and USSR, the opposite of that ideology is communism or socialism, broadly speaking. Here the controlling factor is market, and in this philosophy it is the state directly. We know the history, how it panned out. The world was divided into two poles, India and the global south. Many such countries are not aligned to either of this. Even India had this socialist inclination. Not just India, any country which is affected by colonialism largely has this socialistic tendencies, because these countries looted this global south. And logical necessity, socialism was a logical necessity rather than just a wish. They did not come up with this socialist philosophy from thin air. There are a lot of poor people. It is in this backdrop, India also adopted this line of thinking, socialism. But the problem started when after the after the Second World War, this Washington consensus model was so much popularized, so much glorified, that everybody thought this is the future. Almost most of the media after the Berlin Wall of 1990, the wall between East and West Germany, which corresponds to the two blocks, Western capitalist and the Eastern communist states. That Berlin Wall, where that wall separated Germany into two halves, was broken down. At that critical juncture, many economists said that, okay, this world has seen the rise, the triumph of the so-called Washington consensus. Markets are the ultimate players. But that took a jolt in 2008. What happened? There is a severe financial crisis. European markets, North American markets, and in fact, the entire global economy has taken a hit. This writer calls this as a mistake. He says that 2008 crisis should not be termed as a global financial crisis, rather it is a transatlantic crisis. Meaning that only the mistakes of these countries impacted more the countries of European Union, North and South America, and those which are deeply connected to the US. Was India connected? Not as much as it is today. It was connected, but not as much as it is connected today. During that time, you know what happened? The critique of China, US itself ran to China to seek economic help because they were hoarding dollars. Huge dollars were reserved there. And that act itself shows that Washington consensus is a joke. It always requires a certain element of state intervention. And this myth that Washington consensus will drive the economic activity, free market economy will drive the world forward, was completely dismantled after that crisis. And this parallelly coincided with the growth of China. Significant growth. 2008 also coincided with Beijing Olympics. It's a landmark event in the history of China, primarily because it projected Beijing on the global map, and sometimes even in a bad light. More than anything, the 2008 Beijing Olympics was infamously projected in international media for the smog it had, the kind of pollution it had. And that event followed with incessant debates about how China's growth was also coupled with complete ignorance towards human rights. There is no individual liberty there, and all this rhetoric and narratives were built. China took it on a positive note, and today you would see some of the cleanest cities and the cities with the largest green transition in China. So what is the lesson here? What is the role of the state? You cannot ignore the role of state no matter what. China has proven that time and again. See, most of the times we criticize China and say that this is a socialist economy. No, it is state capitalism. State driven capitalism. State dictates how enterprises should work and what kind of investment should be made, and it will regulate so that corporations grow. But those corporations are not bigger than the state itself. They cannot lobby, just like how the US companies lobby to change the electoral outcomes. That's not possible in China. And this is a model that China gave to the world, especially in the present context. This is what the author is saying. Take the case of US, the first presidential term of Donald Trump. At that point of time, probably, the author says that probably Trump must have taken inspiration from the Chinese model and started to dictate terms. All the principles that US traditionally stood for, he went back upon them. Whether it is exiting World Health Organization, withdrawing from WTO, this kind of bargaining based diplomacy, or the slogans like MAGA or Make America Great Again. All of this indicate a rise of the right-wing politicians, the conservative politicians who are against capital markets. See, if you are saying deglobalization, essentially you are moving towards socialism, right? Markets demand globalization, and this is the greatest paradox you will see. On one hand, you say that US is a place for capitalism, and on the other, you are encouraging deglobalization. Those principles don't coexist. And the greatest contribution or miscontribution of China to international political order is this idea that states can control narratives. States can dictate how markets can function. So this state capitalism works well in a regime like China, not so well in democracies. What is happening as a result? You are witnessing the rise of right-wing politics, and this is leading to many slogans like Make America Great Again, the rising trend of right-wing politics in Europe, and even this Atmanirbhar Bharat is criticized, like Vikasit Bharat is criticized by this writer. There is a danger that rights can take a backseat if state is coming forward, and that is the lesson that China gave to the world. And we should not take that lesson. We should not encourage that trend, because ultimately what is the state here for? Welfare of citizens, and that cannot take a backseat. That's the essence of this article. How is the jewelry sector coping with US tariffs? Yeah. See, what happened after Trump announced tariffs? Basically, jewelry sector is of two kinds. One is the stones and the rough cut stones, or the basic jewelry that you can think of, where the raw materials are imported from elsewhere, and the final finished goods in states like Gujarat, Maharashtra and Rajasthan, the MSME industries, small industries which work in this sector, get their livelihood from this jewelry sector. Now, if Trump imposes 50 and 57% import duties, the market is literally finished. It's simply economically unviable anymore. Okay? Now what should this MSMEs do? They need someone to take care of them, right? And the present article is a opportunity for us to understand how the government acts in situations like this. Okay? So, you need to know how exports and imports work. You need to know the concept of export obligation. You need to know the concept of DTA, domestic tariff area. You need to know what a special economic zone is and how the Ministry of Commerce will come into the picture in this scenario. Okay? Now, let me explain. See, you have something called the Directorate General of Foreign Trade under the Ministry of Commerce. When, let's say, a company A imports raw materials from a foreign country, it need not be the same country to which you are exporting. Let's say, for example, you are getting from Africa into our country some gold, raw gold or some unprocessed gold, and you are working upon it in Surat like places, and then you are selling it to US. And because of the value addition here in this process, you make money. Now, if a duty is imposed on this, this market is killed. This is what we understood. Now, what is the role of DGFT in this? How DGFT regulates or encourages trade, we have to understand. To incentivize trade, you know this formula, right? C plus I plus G plus X minus M. When you're talking about this X minus M, the trade component, to increase trade, government gives some incentives. Those incentives are actually decided by the Directorate General of Foreign Trade. Okay? Now, when this import happens, sometimes duties are exempted for importers in India. You are getting gold from Africa to Surat. Government is not levying any import duty. But in exchange for that, government says that, okay, you can pay a duty now, and let's say, for example, for the value exempted, if let's say this is X, if you are able to export 6X, some multiple, usually it is 6 times from what I remember. 6 times the duty saved if you are exporting, you will be getting this duty as a cashback. First you pay, you do this and you will get that cashback. Or there will be another kind of a scheme, like say for example, there is something called advance license. You go and apply that in DGFT, you will get some advanced license where you don't even have to pay this duty. There the numbers will be slightly different for different sectors. It can be 10x, 9x, whatever. Why is this like this? Because this duty will be in crores sometimes. That capital will not be stuck with the government, right? But in both these cases, there is something called export obligation, EO, which you need to know. This mechanism can be asked in prelims. That's why I am explaining this. Export obligation. In this scenario, obviously the importer cannot fulfill this export obligation. So they will go to the government and say, boss, we are not able to carry out this exports, and I don't think I will be able to fulfill the export obligation. Usually the window is somewhere around 90 days, 3 months. So they went and asked for an extension of this export obligation. Why? Because India is overtly dependent on US as a market. We need to find new markets. It's not like you will immediately find new markets in some other country. You will have to still figure out who will buy this gold ornaments. They will need some time. It will incur an additional cost. And you would need government support in all these cases. So that is the concept of export obligation. And they asked for an extension from 3 months to 6 months, or 270 days. Then there is this concept of domestic tariff area. To understand this DTA, you need to understand the concept of cess. Let's say you have one small unit in Maharashtra or Gujarat area, which is considered a so-called special economic zone. What is the purpose of this? Again, go back to that GDP formula. It is a zone where you get some additional facilities, like you get very cheap land, access to cheap land for a certain lease period. You will get all the finances, all the facilities, all the factors of production, land, labor, capital and enterprise. I mean, you have to figure out the enterprise idea. Rest of the things will be provided in cess. The obligation here is you have to export. Sometimes, one more thing is, this area is not considered for taxation purposes in the same way as mainland. This is treated differently. Now you are getting a competitive advantage, right? Obviously, you cannot expect that you should be allowed to compete with domestic markets. This is only meant for exports. At this point of time, if domestic tariff area exemption is not given, these companies will be shut down. So, even if these companies want to sell in India, they will have to pay some additional duty so that they are brought on par with existing market players. That exemption is also sought out now. This is the concept of domestic tariff area and export obligation that you need to know. If any developments are there, you can know about that. But that's all you need to know. You can ignore the statistics. Okay? That's all for the day. Rot tip. Remission of duties. When will this happen? When you are not able to export, what will you do? No remission. That's the point. So this is one of the scheme, not the only scheme. Okay? This is WTO compliant. Okay? That's it for the day. Thank you.